Alrighty, hello and welcome to another episode of Watchpoint, focusing on the competitive scene of Overwatch and more. I am joined here today by Oplaid and Hex, and how are you guys doing today?
I am doing great, ZP. I am excited for all the changes coming to Overwatch. I think some of the stuff announced this week is going to have a really positive impact on the game, so doing well.
I'm doing great. Got to actually play some Overwatch yesterday. Jumped on the PTR, so I think we'll talk about that a little bit coming up. But it's been a lot of Overwatch lately. I tried to take the day off yesterday of not casting, not doing that. Didn't work out super well for me as I just played Overwatch all day. But yeah, doing great, man.
I mean, you got the rest of voice at the very least, where even if you're playing, you're still just not talking all day, which definitely does help, I can say. All right, though, but we're going to roll right into it. Of course, we are focused on the competitive scene here at Watchpoint, so where else would we start to but talking about the results of the last week. ESL qualifiers, of course, one of the major tournaments that's going on right now. Gamescom, road to 100K. We have new teams that have qualified. Rogue, Melty, Northern Gaming Blue, and Creation Esports all qualifying on the U side. Nubrus, Code 7, Team Liquid, and CLG, as they like to be called, or CLG, qualifying. And for the most part, no real surprises here. We were talking a little bit before the show began, but right now at the ESL qualifiers, I feel like the first 2 weeks are sort of all right, we know the top 8 in each region are going to qualify. No big surprises here. Hex, Oplaid?
Yeah, not really. I mean, obviously, Rogue and Creation didn't make it in last week because they were involved in another ESL event, so they couldn't play the qualifier. And NA, it's pretty expected. I think, One Shot took a game off Team Liquid in the game before qualifying. There's a couple other teams that are vying to be in there. Could have gotten in because, like you said, CLG had the easier draw against Brother. Mm-hmm. So next week should be a little more interesting, I think, for sure. We're going to see some probably up-and-coming teams or lesser-known teams making it in. So it'll be fun.
Personally, I think the one team that is notably missing right now from the qualifiers that probably should get in next week, and it'll be a little bit weird if they don't, is One Shot. I think One Shot should be poised to get in NA qualifying number 3. On the EU side of things, I feel like it's mostly wide open. Are there any notable teams in EU that haven't qualified yet? If there I think it would be more the dark horse teams, right? Like your Pretz of the world and all the rest that still need to qualify. X?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, guys. All sorts of push and talk buttons happening today. I think there was a team called Deathmatch Gang. They faced Rogue the other day, looked really good in the first 5 minutes they faced against him. Rogue did win that 3-0 eventually, but I think we expected One Shot to eventually get in. They're definitely top 16 in North America. They're definitely going to get in at some point. And then Blam's team is definitely upcoming here. I think I have them on kind of the same level as One Shot. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Rogue, I don't know. I kind of just want to talk generally about Rogue. Where do you guys think they're at right now? Because they've been up and down all over the place in the EU.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little iffy. I mean, I think I said last week they were slumping, but they had just won, a big 3-0 against, I forget who it was, Mr. Creation. And I got a little flack for that. But, this week they were kind of up and down too, and they haven't really emerged as the team you might expect them to be, I guess, with the roster that they have. You think this is a team that would be winning multiple events regularly, but they're kind of, in that 3-4 spot a lot of the time. So it's a little confusing.
I think Rogue, the top of EU, Rogue goes, I think, mostly based on how well Tavik plays, right? It's so much based on him. They're not spreading that talent out across the roster. Conversely, I mean, this is just my overall arching sentence on EU. Creation is going to be good and consistent because that talent is spread out very consistently across the roster. They're all good players. And then you have teams like Rogue that I think they rely a lot more on one player. What do you think about that? Am I wrong?
I think for Rogue, it's easy to focus on Tavik just because, of course, he is such a dominant player, a player that has been on top teams since the very inception of the game, effectively. I mean, Tavik is really, really good. He's a team that he's been the core of many, many good teams, so naturally he's going to get focused on. For Rogue as a whole, I mean, does Rogue entirely depend on Tavik? I'm not sure. I mean, arguably you could say Creation is a little bit more balanced between, say, Linkser, Artier, and company. I'm not really sure. I mean, the thing about the EUC in general right now is that the top teams seem to have a lot of parity, especially between Creation, Misfits, and Rogue. I say that it's been a little bit more tilted in favor of Rogue as of late, but when you watch the teams play each other, it feels like of all the teams that they're all in the same caliber, they can all beat each other on any given day and all the rest. But more to your question on Rogue and Tavik, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just easy to over-focus on Tavik, but the other members of Rogue are also really good as well. Sam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
And not anything much more to say than what you did. So, yeah, I mean, EU, it is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a crapshoot in a lot of ways. I think Misfits won the battle this week, and Creation won the Acer event.
Right, yeah.
And,
yes.
Rogue and Reunited are both up there as well, so it's any given Sunday, really.
Yeah, I just,
of course.
Go ahead. No, I think Creation is overlooked in a lot of aspects. When people talk about teams, I think that the other teams in EU look flashier, look more exciting in their victories. Like I guess this is a North American show in some regard, so we're trying to get a sports analogy going for Creation. I think they're the Spurs, right? They don't do anything exceptionally well. They're just consistent, and it's spread across. They're like kind of like feel like wily old vets always can beat another team. I think the other teams right now in EU are flashy. I guess I'm really just struggling I want to crown someone as the best team in EU. And I think like Creation is probably the best in that regard, is that they beat all the other teams pretty consistently. Yes, they lose some as well, but I want to say Creation is doing it in a very, it feels like a very EU manner.
We'll save most of this for later on when we talk about upcoming changes and whatnot, but I do think one thing that's going to play out really well for Creation going into the future is, of course, the potential changes coming out to McCree. Our tier of all players, I feel like in the EU scene, has really been grinding out McCree more so than anyone else. I mean, he's played McCree back when he wasn't meta. He played McCree really well when he was meta, and he had some incredible McCree showings in the Acer tournament. Even when McCree, of course, is been out of the meta. So now McCree is going to be getting buffed in some form or fashion for the next major patch. Things I feel like can only look up for Creation.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff, and obviously the support changes where your aim might actually matter for some of these players who are playing Mercy all the time. Should make some pretty interesting shifts in the standings and maybe rosters. But like we said, we'll save that for later. I think we should talk a little bit about the NA scene a little bit. I mean, they had a couple events too. Obviously, we talked about the ESL qualifier. You had the Beyond the Summit tournament going on, where they had the first bracket, I guess, for it, where two teams qualified with Envious and Code 7. And then in Beat It, we have Code 7 doing very well leading into the last couple of matches, and losing to Envious, obviously. But they beat Cloud9 in two different events. So they're kind of looking up after they left their organization, Gale Force, in the middle of our last show last week.
So Code 7 has really been aided by one thing. So it's a few things, I guess. But one thing in particular really stands out is that Roadhog has come into the meta. He's been being used by a lot more teams. And Harblue has really become very, very comfortable on Roadhog. There was no better example of that in the tournaments over the weekend than the matchup in the Beat Invitational where Code 7 played against C9. And Harblue effectively solo carried on Gibraltar. Literally every single team fight, he would go in there and get 2 to 3 kills reliably. It gave them a full hold on Hangar and basically won the map outright. But you look at a lot of their play in general, Harblue has really stepped up his play for Code 7. And obviously a lot of people have been thinking that Nicholas and Torque have really stepped up a little bit more in recent times too. But I feel like Harblue has been the most improved person for that roster. And it's been sort of the tipping point. We've seen a lot in Overwatch too, where you have one person just gets better, or you replace one person for someone who is better. And that can be enough to completely shift how a team wins or loses against other teams in the game.
Uh-oh, he's muted again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Harblue on that team is so strange because he was off and then on, and I know I bring that up a lot. It just
cut him, right? They cut him and they brought him back.
They cut him and brought him back.
They couldn't find better options. I mean, he told me that was because they thought he was playing solo too much. So maybe on the Winstons you'd be jumping in.
He still is.
They're not wrong.
Right, but if he's being that effective, then it doesn't matter, right? So.
There was literally a point where I think it was nap time. They said where nap time was on a stream, and then they had a Roadhog flanking, just like a random pub Roadhog, and he called out on voice chat saying Harblue, and everyone knew what they meant because Harblue constantly does this thing where he's flanking on Roadhog. He does it to every team. And at this point, people know it's coming, and yet he still gets value off it. I mean, it's sort of a testament, perhaps, to where Roadhog is right now in terms of overall strength and power, but there was a point where teams weren't dealing with it and they were getting beaten by it. and now they're trying to deal with it, and they're still getting beaten by it. And I don't know, it's Hard Blue style, but it has been working out.
I think the match you mentioned is the most impressive because we know that they're a team that watches VODs, they watch tournaments, they know it's coming, right? They know that Harblue is going to freelance out there and he's going to try to get picks, and they still couldn't stop it. Like, it's just been insane because I've talked to teams and they're like, well, that's clearly what he does and maybe we can take advantage of it, and no one's found a way to do it. He gets punished sometimes when he's just like out of the fight. Like, if they see him flanking and they're like, we're just not going to deal with it, we're not even going to go back, or we're just going to push forward and take this 5v6. But it happens so rarely that his play in Roadhog has actually just changed the game for them. They're always taking fights in an advantage. He always gets the first pick. It's insanity. I don't know when it's going to end. I thought last week it would because teams had seen it for a while, and we've made a very strong point of calling it out every cast. Like, this is just what Hardblue does, and he's always on the flank, he's always on the side, and no one has been able to deal with it effectively. And as you said, maybe it kind of speaks to how strong Roadhog is right now. But yeah, Hardblue has, I don't want to say carried that team, but he's been the thing that's put them over the edge as of late.
It's that Team Fortress 2 Rome soldier. He's got like 10 years of experience with that play style, and it's working out right now. It'll be interesting what happens with the next patch because there's a lot of up and down for Roadhog, I think, but we'll wait and see. Obviously right now for Code 7, it's working out great. Yeah, pretty much the time they most want to do it. I think that they're a very in-demand team right now. They're not signed to an organization. There's a lot of huge organizations who want to put a lot of money in, but there aren't that many teams that are that talented. So they're gonna make bank especially after a week where they beat. It's not like they beat Cloud9 in one match or something. They beat Cloud9 in 2 different best-of-5 series. They beat Luminosity. They beat NG Red. Basically, the only one that stopped them was Envious, who shut them out. But right. Envious is basically unstoppable right now, I guess. So.
Envious is murdering everyone. So, and there was no better statement of that where Code 7 beat C9 in a thriller. It was 3-2. It was really close. It was one of the better sets of Overwatch you could watch. And then they played against Envious, and it was sort of back and forth, but Envy was clearly dominant. And then they got to Dorado, which could be best described as a train wreck in Overwatch. I know Hex and I have casted a lot of games for Overwatch, going all the way back effectively to the beginning in Beta 1. We have never seen a game between 2 top teams, not, a round of 128 matches, but between 2 top teams that was just as catastrophic as that Dorado game. Envy treated Code 7 like they were a pub team. It was brutal. They literally, there's a point where Taimu was just sitting outside the spawn door as Reaper. You just looked as like, this is happening right now. And it was just sort of the statement here where Envy is just, I don't really know. Obviously part team house, part incredible talent, whatever you want to call it. But Envy is without a doubt now. They've pulled away from the pack. They're at least a full tier ahead of pretty much everyone else in the NA scene right now until proven otherwise.
Yeah, they're defining the tier. They're the Envy tier. And I think we'll end up probably using that term like when another team does this because it's just been so impressive from them. Even back to the IDDQD days, what really brought that beating down for me the other day is, yes, Envy did it, and then I'm thinking like, well, maybe that's not just Envy, maybe it's the map, maybe it's a thing you can do, and then Reunited tried it and absolutely failed. Like a couple sets back too. Like they tried to do the same thing. I'm like, well, maybe it's just a Dorado thing because these rooftops are pretty good to hold early, and like maybe the exits. No, it's just Envy. It's just Envy being insane, and I've said it since the beginning of time that team is so strong across the board. You try to find weaknesses, and usually on any team, if you ask me like who's the weakest player, I can come up with 1 or 2 good ideas of like maybe they could get better here, they could get better there. Envy across the board, I have no idea. They have probably the 2 best DPSs on the planet. It's just insanity. They're clearly their own thing, and we've talked about Evil Empire. They're the undefeated Patriots. They're the Yankees. They're just that much better than everyone else right now, and I have no idea what a team's going to have to do to be able to compete with them. I think it starts again maybe buying a house. It seems like it's worked out for them so well.
It'll be interesting leading into the right now obviously be a huge upset, right, if Envy lost the $100,000 ESL LAN.
Yes, but
it'll be interesting what happens there when, like, I think the effort level for Envy might be a little higher than most teams right now when we're just having all these online events.
Right.
And leading into that 100K tournament, a lot of teams are going to be doing boot camps for a couple weeks. They're going to be actually playing together in a house. They're probably going to be able to level up at a higher rate than they have been for a while. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually makes a difference and allows some of these teams to catch up to where Envy's at right now, which is clearly another level, in part because they had put in the effort to reach that level with the team house, with in-person preparation. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But obviously, they're going to be heavy favorites no matter what.
It comes to the point, though, where if you take a map off Envy, you're immediately on the radar. You're just immediately like second tier. Like NG Red taking a map off them the other night it's probably their best win, to be honest. That's how good Envy is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Maybe those teams can level up, but everyone is so far behind right now.
The interesting thing, and we're going to touch on a little bit more when you get to our PTR note, though, is that I just want to preface all this team tier talk that as we saw it happen with C9 when we got our last balance patch, balance patches can really change the landscape in terms of what teams are dominant and which teams are not. Envy has been very much aided by the fact that Tailspin is one of the best, if not the best Pharah in the game right now in terms of performance and matches in a very Pharah-centric meta. If things go live the way they are right now, I feel like that plays much more back in the C9's strengths, where either Reaver or Surefour could be just phenomenal McCrees. It worked out really, really well for them. So we'll have to see. We'll get to that a little bit later. We do have some other team news to cover, but it is worth noting that patches change a lot in terms of dominance.
And that one will probably be out before the 100K event, so we're going to see a much different game, before the first real land. So, speaking of leveling up the level, some teams have been making roster changes. One of the recent ones, Splice revealed that they're trying out players for 2 positions with Flame and Steel out of the lineup, which is a little bit of a surprise because Steel is obviously by far the highest profile player. They said he's still staying under contract as a streamer for the team, but he's not going to be in the lineup, which in some ways it's a surprise, but it's also not, because I think you could clearly point to him as underperforming a bit compared to other players at his position, which is maybe one reason why Splice is kind of a second or maybe third tier team at the moment. I mean, how do you guys feel about it?
For me, it doesn't really come as a surprise, although it's one of those things where I thought that Splice needed to make changes. Of the people they could have cut, I was a little bit surprised who they cut, although I don't really know who would have been a good choice, right? Because for Steel, it sort of goes, wow, this is our highest profile player. He's really well known. Do you want to cut a person that already has a built-in fan base? Even though a lot of it in chat was a bunch of Steel lulls, etc. I think half of those were in good fun. Like, it was a draw to the team. And then, of course, Flame goes way back with a lot of people on the team like Pure, so wasn't really expecting him to get the boot either. Now, you can talk about performance-wise, maybe it's needed, maybe it's not. I will say this, that Splice cutting people is probably an omen of things to come for other teams. I'm not going to call it out on air, but I have heard about other top teams that are not Envy where there are some surprising roster changes that could be happening for pretty much any team that's not Envy. Teams are very, very cutthroat right now, where if they're not immediately number one, everyone is looking for a way of, who's weak, who do we cut, who do we bring in to bring things up to the next level, just because of how much is at stake right now in regards to money in tournaments, money for sponsorships, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it is a strange time right now as far as just organizations and sponsorships. A lot of people got in early. A lot of people are looking to get back in. And we talked about it a little bit with Code 7 and Gale Force earlier. Splice, I think they got a lot of ire from the community and, viewers, players, etc. Just because, these guys haven't done anything as a roster. They haven't won any games. They got signed mostly based on their history in other games. Now, that history is amazing. They were all great in other games. So I don't think people are really surprised they're not super performing at the highest level. I think you fix Splice, you just start again, and this is going to be no surprise to anyone who's watched anything I've ever casted as Splice. You start with Clockwork, you build around him. Clockwork has been that good. He has been that good on that team as well. He's been good on every single roster. If you can start putting pieces around him that are playing a little better, that'd be great. Flame had a good Symmetra play. I don't know how the comms are on the teams. I guess he's out as well. I don't know. I think there is talent on that team. They're definitely underperforming. I know they probably got signed a little too early to an organization. But for me, and it always has been, I'm a huge fanboy. I make no bias about it. Clockwork is a great player. If you have that as your starting piece, you should be able to contend at some point.
I mean, I think it's just interesting with Splice and maybe FaZe. You have a lot of these legacy players from other games who probably contributed a lot to you getting signed into that organization. Yeah. Because the results obviously weren't there previously for the teams. I mean, obviously, Splice was okay. They were okay. They had better results than FaZe, but they weren't at the top level. And now you're kind of replacing some of those guys after you got the contract, which makes some sense. But it's also is that why you got signed? Can you really get up to the level that might be expected of you? So I don't know. It's kind of interesting that that's kind of like the dynamic that's happening here, but in a lot of ways it's not surprising. And teams really are trying to gear up for the future and this big 100K tournament.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing too is that I think teams need a starting point somewhere. Because you look at some of the other teams that are available, the closest thing you have to a starting point right now, if you're a new team getting in for an unsigned team that's not Code 7, would be One Shot or something. And One Shot, I mean, they're on the rise, but it would still be, you'd have to work at it to bring them from where they are now to like true top team. At some point, though, if you want to be an org that's in the scene, you have to start with something and then try and build, bring people in and so forth. It's easier if you have an established team. So even if Splice, isn't getting the results that they want, they still have a team that was getting... It's weird to say because Splice got invited to a lot of invite tournaments and they were the worst of the invite teams. But you look at their performance in open tournaments and they were able to beat a lot of other teams as sort of a gatekeeper type team. So it's not that they were bad or like they are bad, but just like of the top teams, they're on the lower end of the top teams. If that makes any sense.
As an organization, they've at least established themselves as a name that we're talking about Splice here, that we're like in the future, we're going to talk about Splice roster changes and things like that. So I think getting in early is not necessarily bad for them at this point. They haven't done terribly enough that everyone's just writing them off, although Splice is the butt of some jokes and some spam. I think that they're fine if they start changing up the roster. They've shown a little bit where they have fights where they beat teams. I guess that's a step below between taking a set or taking a map, but they've beaten teams in fights. They've looked close here and there. They've on the top teams, it's not like it's always one-sided. You always give them a little bit of a puncher's chance. Like if this, and this, then Splice will maybe take this map. But I think it's good for them to get in early because again, we're talking about them, so at least they're relevant as far as an organizational.
I definitely think
approach.
that they could take a pretty big step forward if they pick up the right guys for these last positions. I know I was just talking to Pierre, and he said they have like almost 200 applicants right now, and then maybe 30 of them are good. But I know they've tried out a couple other TF2 players, like some guys I played with in the past, like Shrugger, who's kind of turned some heads on Street Hoops when they played.
Yeah, Shrugger's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then like Sickness was another long-time TF2 player who I played with a couple times, and he's got amazing aim. He was one of the first, 78 rated skill rating people I think on the ladder. So they've got some options who I think could definitely take them to another level. I mean, when you have like even one DPS player underperforming, like at the pro level, it makes like a huge difference in terms of how strong your team is performing overall. So
where's Blaze right now? You might know. Like Blaze and Clockwork together would be amazing.
I don't know what I mean. I just think he doesn't like Overwatch or something. I don't know, man. I don't know, man.
He's in
There's
the
like
banning camp
guys,
then.
Yeah, in the banning maybe. I mean, he had a job where he like worked 3 nights a week, so he felt that he couldn't play as often as other people, or as like we were playing. At least when I was playing with Mezzer and Dummy and the other guys on Team Liquid now. So that was one reason why he didn't switch over then. But I don't know. I don't know if the game's really caught his attention that much. Like same with a couple other guys. Bannies, like you said. But I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, like there's so much coming into Overwatch. It's just like you can't, like it'd be stupid not to switch over. Like if you're that good of a gamer and you're that dedicated to gaming, really. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. But
at least TF2 is updating their competitive mode now. It seems timely.
A little too late, man. I mean,
it's like okay
about that, but like if they had done that, like 5-6 years ago, like TF2 would be huge right now. Like I mean, it could have had a, maybe not exactly like CS, but a CSS, rise in terms of its popularity, but they blew it.
Even just like. And this is a big segue, or like quick segue before we get into PTR stuff, but really for Valve, even just the barest minimum of support, just the tournament here and there with all the as they drown in Steam money, competitive support a little bit earlier. TF2 could have had a much bigger following than it has right now, at least as far as the comp scene goes. It's sort of
I'm
they didn't
clearly
even...
biased, but
yes.
TF2 was actually a great competitive game, and like it was fun to watch. It had a good pacing to it. Like it had. In some ways, it has advantages over Overwatch and some of those things, but it's just, you can't get there without the developer giving you a little help, which Blizzard is obviously doing or attempting to do with Overwatch for varying levels of success, but they're definitely very involved. So, Overwatch has a bright future. Speaking of Blizzard's involvement, yes, the
PTR.
We've got the first new hero since the game was released. and she's pretty amazing. First new support. Back at BlizzCon, a year ago, everyone was looking forward to the 3 new heroes and a new support added the 4 on the roster, especially with Symmetra being, such a specialized hero. Mm-hmm. And then they weren't adding a support, even though it was the least represented role. So finally, we're getting one, and I think Anna has the tools to really shake things up, and I think actually be viable and mean that Lucio and Mercy aren't the 2, locked in picks.
The biggest thing about Ana, there's a lot of things about her, and sure, is that she has just an incredible decision-making set. It's one of those things where you want to talk about decision-making skills in games. Just her versatility leads her to being able to make a whole lot of decisions, all sort of situations. So seeing what people do with that in terms of, heal, attack, or whatever it might be in the fray of things is going to be awesome. She has her sleep dart seems incredibly powerful when the team plays around it. And of course, her buff ultimate is also huge. There's a lot of things in her that when a well-coordinated team plays around it, at least in theory, it seems absolutely terrifying. I'm not sure it's the best kit for general pubbing, but man, it's exciting to look at.
No, you're absolutely right. The key is coordination. You nail her ult on someone who's going crazy, and that's going to change everything. That if you can get a team to play with her, I think she's going to be super high level. Mm-hmm. My first impressions were that at highest level she's going to be overpowered. At the medium and lowest level she's going to be underpowered and underwhelming because people are not going to be able to heal as well with her. You can't run her as a solo support, I don't think, at all. Maybe Rogue will try it because Rogue does weird stuff. Maybe FaZe will try because FaZe tries weird stuff.
Think about all those feeding Widowmakers, right? Now imagine a feeding Widowmaker who doesn't have a grapple, stands somewhere where they can't get killed by Tracer. That's going to be like what Anna's going to be like for a lot of bad players, I think. But yeah, at the top level, she's a super exciting hero. I've talked to a couple pros, and I was even saying this before. She might be the highest skill cap hero in the entire game now.
Yeah, I agree.
Because she has such a huge range of decisions to make that have massive impacts on the game with her kit. Plus, she actually has she doesn't have headshots, but she still has a very high aim component with her rifle, which will separate good players from bad, which is more unique than any of the current supports. Obviously Zenyatta takes great aim, but it's a little different with what Ana brings to the table. So she's going to make a huge impact. For those who don't know her kit, she can heal and damage with the sniper rifle. She's got a grenade that buffs her team's healing. And it also makes the enemy team receive 0 healing, which is massively powerful. It also does 60 damage. You can combo it with her sniper rifle to kill flankers. And then she has a sleep dart, which sleeps you for 6 seconds.
Yeah.
If it hits you.
I guess I'm filling in for Slasher today, so I have to talk a little bit about sleep dart and stuns in FPS games. It's not awesome to play against. I played against just before we came on today. I played against double McCree and double Anna in a quick match just because I was messing around on the PTR, and I didn't have to touch my keyboard for most of that game. I was just stunned out and sleeping for a lot of it. So that's an interesting thing to look at. I'm not going to give it all my opinions on it too, but in competitive, that's crazy. If you hit someone who's a little bit out of position and you sleep dart them, and then everyone knows to not hit them, you're already giving a 1v6 immediately, and it's not even a kill, or a 5v6 rather. In
competitive, I think sleep dart's going to be tough to use, even for organized teams, because a lot of the fighting is happening in a small area, and there's lots of chip damage flying around, and you're not with Ana. You don't have mobility, so you can't position yourself in a spot where you can actually hit their back line on most maps with a sleep dart. So it's going to be really map dependent and situation team dependent when she can use that like that. But it's also a very good anti-engage tool because when teams jump on you, like a monkey jumps on you, you can single him out and things like that. So.
The other thing too, the sleep dart, we did a little bit of testing with it, Oplaid, just when it came out, and we're looking at and all the rest. And the sleep dart is actually pretty hard to hit. It's not a super forgiving hitbox. So it's one of those things where it's almost softly incentivizing you to use it on the bigger targets, your Reinhardts as he charges in, your Winstons, your Roadhogs, because you're pretty much guaranteed to hit them. You have a smaller target in the back line, especially a Tracer, your Genjis, so on and so forth. A little bit less guaranteed to hit with. So it is sort of incentivizing you to use it on tanks a little bit more, but surely, of course, you get the top players where they get really good with aim and whatnot. Everything will be on the table.
The ultimate looks really good, though, right? That ultimate looks insane. How do you stop it?
Okay, it's the ultimate is like a weird one for me because everyone's talking about that and they're like, oh my god, I can combo with this and that. Like you can just combo with everything. Everyone is going to be good when they shoot. You know, like you have 50% more damage, move 50% faster. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but you move faster, you shoot faster, you do more damage, and you take less damage. So it's kind of like a mini god mode.
It combos with a mediocre player playing all right. Like that's how good it is. Is it's fine. Like it's just you can't kill the person who has it. They're just going to be a wrecking crew on it. At the highest levels of play, I don't even know what I'm going to see. To be honest, I'm worried about the first time I see that come off that I'm just going to watch the game uninstall and shut down because that's how good it looks.
That Anna's sleep dart kind of counters it. It lasts 8 seconds and her sleep lasts 6 seconds, so she can kind of counter it herself. I mean, there are other ways to deal with it too, like Roadhog Ultimate. Right now, like this patch seems like a bad patch for Roadhog because Anna, can reduce his healing, deal chip damage to him easily, and also Zenyatta's getting buffs, which is really bad for Roadhog. But I think that his ult will be very powerful against that Anna ult if that really starts to impact matches. Because if he uses it, there's nothing anyone can really do if they're ulted with Anna ult. They're just gonna get pushed back even if they don't die.
Well, you think about the Ana ult and things that really do well against it. Of course, we were talking about that before. Think about what's compared. It is a support class ultimate, so it's going up against Transcendence, Resurrection, and Sound Barrier. And Sound Barrier, I don't think fares super, super well. I think a class that's hit with a nano boost can probably chew through that. Transcendence, though, is a little bit trickier unless you can get a one-shot on the hero you're on. And Resurrection, of course, is always Resurrection. Yeah. No, the buff is going to be insane for Trans, where I think it's 300 HP healed a second now. So effectively, unless you're headshotting people as a Reaper with a single headshot, you're not. A lot of characters are going to find it difficult to actually kill through Transcendence even with a nano boost. And then, of course, Resurrection is still Resurrection. Okay, you get buffed up as a Reaper or something. You go in with a Death Blossom, you kill 4 people. Mercy was in the back and reses everyone up. What do you do? So it's one of those things where it's really powerful, but as a support ultimate, it kind of has to be powerful when you consider what it's up against and what you're sacrificing by running an Ana, by comparison.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It's totally fair. I think, though, the things that I'm most excited about and most, not displeased with, I guess, are probably the Zenyatta buffs. I mean, he's just been so MIA. Like, you gotta get him back in the game somehow. And I think they talked about they were going to give him 50. Maybe it's going to be reverted to 75 health. I mean, just anything. I don't think the ult
they already nerfed him in the most recent build, where his damage went down from, 45 to 40 per orb. So that I think is probably a change in the right direction, because his damage output was pretty insane, and it's still going to be good like that. But that kind of is a fair trade-off for giving him the extra health, I think.
I feel it's a weird thing they did with Transcendence. Like, the healing is fine. That's totally perfect. Make sure that no one really dies in Transcendence. Give it the Uber kit. Like, the double speed, I feel is like, I don't know anyone who was clamoring for that they felt they were out of position.
It makes a lot of sense, though, because
really?
You want to play far away when you're Zenyatta, because if you're close... Well, now it's a little different, I guess. In the past, you wanted to play far away because you only had 150 health, and you died to chip damage. So it is a little different now, but that would have helped then to get you into the fight when you want to ult. I guess now it doesn't matter as much, so it is a little weird, but
right.
I mean, it mitigates a lot of the risks that Zenyatta had before getting into the fight. So with 200 health, maybe it isn't really needed. That is kind of an interesting point. I didn't really think about that.
I mean, the problem with Zenyatta is that he might have 200 health now, but is he prepared for Railgun McCree, who has made his way back on the PTR? It actually just does feel like a Railgun. I think my first experience of McCree on the PTR wasn't even Mercy boosted, but it was on Route 66. There was a Mercy on the high rafters on second. And I was just walking through the tunnel, looked at Mercy from across the map, hit one headshot, one body shot, and she died. I'm just like, okay, this is now a thing. And
almost
I understand
as good as Beta 1 McCree, but not.
It's
close.
Oh my!
Not even close. Still, can you imagine the game we used to play? It's funny imagining all the nerfs that we had.
The fall of change is one of those things where I'm not really sure McCree needed it. I understand why it's probably coming in. It's probably coming in because you look at comp games, and one of the things determining whether or not you win a game is, can your Pharah win Pharah v Pharah battles, because everything else was sort of subpar killing it. We did see some teams start running McCree 76 in recent memory to some effect, but it wasn't really a shutdown answer for Pharah. Pharah still lived for a really long time. It's part of why Envious has been so dominant, because you put something like Tailspin on Pharah, he's going to win most of your Pharah v Pharah fights. Now, though, if McCree actually stays, at the power level he is on PTR, you have a McCree and a 76 on a team. I feel like no one's going to want to run Farah against that. I mean, Farah goes up, Farah goes down.
The support's dinking you for 80 damage every second.
Yeah, Ana's going to be piling on too. So it's just sort of, okay, they're running an Ana and a McCree. Farah goes up. Farah is just like, oh, there's a Farah in the air. Ana switches the DPS for the Farah. The McCree throws in shots. I mean, the Farah's not going to live.
I mean, maybe it's PTSD because I did play in Beta 1 and I did play a lot of Farah against that old McCree, but I don't think this is a good patch at all. What's the point? Why? It was fine. Even comp players were getting back to getting onto McCree. They're like, oh yeah, I shouldn't be able to 1v1 everyone in the game. That's why Fan of the Hammer was changed. Good. So now I have to rely on my left clicks, and I'm a very consistent, good source of damage, and if I hit headshots, I'm rewarded. The skill ceiling's high. This is amazing, and I have a stun. What a great hero. And then, like, I have no idea why they put more damage on him. It makes no sense to me. You can't run a Farah now at all unless you're going to like dedicate a Zarya to it. She has to be always with a shield. She's a peak hero now with a rocket launcher. I don't know. I have a lot of bad things to say about this. I have no idea why they buffed McCree again, and maybe that's from the flashbacks I've had from the long ago days when McCree was super strong. But like, what's his role? What's he supposed to do? Is he just anti-Farah and anti-everything again? The damage I thought was in a good spot. I thought actually the nerf to Fan of Hammer, I'm like, good, perfect. I'm not even mad playing against McCree's anymore. That is a balanced hero. He's good to play against. If I'm a Farah and I get 2-shot by McCree, that was my fault. But now it's just, I don't know. Again, it feels like another change that they made, and I don't know why. I don't know who was calling for it, who was clamoring for it, who needed more help on McCree. I feel it lowers the skill ceiling in a way, and I don't like that.
I can answer that a little bit in that you have to, I think one thing that plays into it, and I don't have any confirmation on this, but just judging based on other things people found out in regards to MMR and what heroes are best to play on for high amounts of MMR. My guess is that McCree probably was not doing very well on the super low end either. And I assume that one of the goals Blizzard has is to make heroes viable at all levels. I mean, within reason. They're not going to get perfect, right? But they don't want a hero like McCree to be, 30% win rate at low MMR, which who knows? Maybe he could have been at. So
I mean, he was still like mostly supplanted in pro games though too by Seth Soldier. Like in recent matches, right? So
for like
it's not
a
like
week,
he was really
though,
represented.
But he came back for like a week. Everyone ran Soldier instead of McCree. But then like the week after, the high tier McCrees got back on McCree to help out in the Farah battle, and it was really interesting to watch. To be honest, it was nuanced. It was fun to watch.
For McCree, I'll say this. The last week, we've actually seen a huge resurgence of McCree, especially on the EU side of things, where we were seeing McCree in most games coming out. So teams really they got over the shell shock of the fan nerf, and they were running him a lot more frequently, the deal of stuff. And, I mean, there were points where Arts here, I think, had 3, 4, even 5Ks, like in the last time we saw Creation. So, whether or not McCree needs to get buffed or not is sort of...
It'll be interesting. I mean, it's a PTR change. It might not even go live, right? Like, they're testing stuff out. Sure. They already reverted, the Mercy 50% damage buff, which obviously no one thought was needed at all. Right. I mean, there's a lot of bad things for Farah in this patch, too. Like, obviously, with the addition of, Ana and Zenyatta potentially being in the meta, that's really bad for her, too. So, but I think in some ways it's good, though, because Farah is one of those heroes that's been really hard to counter, especially when you go back to one hero limit and you can't have multiple McCrees or Widows or whatever. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
You make a fair point that it's only PTR, and I'm just doing my part to make sure that it never goes live. We haven't even talked about D.Va, really. What do you guys think?
Speaking of things that should never go live. I mean, I was, sitting there playing on PTR like I'm Zenyatta, top damage and healing, like owning everyone. I'm like, I'll just discord this D.Va and just destroy her. And then it's just like, nope, shield. And then I'm like, and then shield, you can't do anything. It's like so frustrating to play against her now. It's amazing. I mean, it's like I think it's a great change in a lot of ways, but I think it just needs a little bit of tweaks because I like that she'll be able to use the shield more often because it makes it actually really viable and it really raises the skill ceiling for like how she can react to the plays other people can make. It's just right now like it's almost like she has it up so often she doesn't need to react. She can just whenever you look at her, she just spams it and then you look away and then she kills you and then So
a 2 to 3 second toggle, maybe something like that, because it's at 1 second now, I think, and it just makes it impossible to play against her, especially if you're playing a hero with a lower fire rate. Like as a Farah or a Junkrat, you might as well just save your ammo because you're not getting anything through.
Also, you wouldn't think that a 1 second change would be that significant. The biggest part of the shield, absolutely, but The ultimate change as well. 3 seconds on the explosion. Part of it is people not being used to it, but it's outright going to catch more people now. Like, more people are going to get blown up by the bomb. And not the least of which is the fact that she's not damaged by it anymore. So D.Va can drop the bomb and then actually hunt you down as Zero Suit D.Va without worrying about it. And she does pretty good damage in that form. So if you're trying to avoid the D.Va bomb, the last thing you want to do is actually man fight the D.Va in the middle of everything. So her entire ult combo and how she uses that, it's much stronger. So her ultimate is probably going to be much higher impact. We'll get actually, at potentially 2 to 3 Ks in pro games from time to time. Her shield has way more utility. I mean, I don't really know what her ceiling is, especially if nothing changes, but I assume it'd be extremely high.
I know some people have talked about even potentially using her as a Reinhardt replacement because you might be able to shield whenever you need to have shield, basically. Mm-hmm. Which, I'm not sure that will actually happen on most maps, but, it's definitely a possibility for some comps. I think the ult changes are definitely pretty interesting because now it's like, when it was 4 seconds, I don't think there's ever a position on a map where I felt like I just couldn't avoid it, I think, if I, ran right away. But with 3 seconds, mm-hmm. there's, definitely tons of times where if you're, in melee range and she uses it, you're just dead, and there's nothing you can really do about it. So, I don't know, that is pretty interesting, and I think it's hard to really judge, the effectiveness of that right now, until we see it in action more often. But overall, obviously, D.Va needed some changes, and I think it's pretty good. Just we need little tweaks so that everyone agreed. Would you rather have, more speed or more damage or something different like that, or?
Speed damage, I don't know. I think I always thought for D.Va going in before they made these changes, I always thought that she didn't necessarily need more shielding. I liked her idea of, just being a really aggro tank. I would have... Again, I'm no game designer. Maybe this is why I'm not a game designer, but I thought that would have been neat to have her just be, make her speed boost full Sanic fast, oh my god, a D.Va's diving in on me, what do I do type of thing. Make the most out of a 4-second barrier. Make her really this sort of I'm going to throw people off of points tank even more so than Winston. But she's now in a different
this makes her more a tank, an actual tank.
It does.
She wasn't really an actual tank, even though she had a lot of armor because it was so easy just to headshot her down, basically, whenever she was facing you. So now there's more of a, I guess, penalty for trying to focus her like that, which, I think is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. No, it's not bad. We'll see how it pans out, but definitely having more alternatives to Reinhardt period would be pretty nice, especially for pub games as well.
That's the big one right now, right?
Yeah.
Because now, I think the support metagame is going to see a lot of shifts with the Zen and Ana coming in, where there's going to be a lot of different viable support lineups. With Reinhardt, there's maybe not any other alternatives for most maps, but
well, it's kind of bad. You talk about solo ranked and whatnot too. Of course, we like talking about the comp scene, but even just, I think one of the more frustrating things when you're in a pub game right now, especially if it's more unorganized, is that if a team has a Reinhardt and a payload map in most cases, and your team just doesn't want to run it, it's problematic just because of how much more power Reinhardt has having one versus not having one. So if D.Va's pretty popular, if D.Va can fill sort of the Reinhardt role a little bit more effectively and give you a second big shield tank option, it's nothing but healthy for the game.
And maybe they can buff Winston's shield back again now that one hero limit's going to be a thing, right? Maybe give him a little more shielding there instead of 50% nerf that he had, which was directly in response to double Winston comps. I don't know. I guess that's another discussion, but
I will say just briefly that if they are going to stick with this one hero thing, which they've done in competitive now too, and they definitely kind of imposed it on tournaments, whether willingly or not, that it's going to be easier to balance. The game should overall be easier to balance if you only have to balance for one of those specific heroes, because I think that was a big problem. I think maybe that's even where the changes come down, is the guys in charge of balance are do you want it for one or you want it for two? Because I can't do both. It's really hard right now. So we'll see how that goes down, especially in regards to Winston,
especially also on some of the maps. Payload was fairly various, right, with one hero or two hero limit, but not the other maps. So
King of the Hill was just and even 2CP had issues too in regards to stacking, just moving in, and certain blitz offenses being way too good.
And in some ways, I do think it sucks that you lose some of those interesting strats. Some of the gimmicky stuff is pretty fun sometimes, but in general, it's just way better for balance, especially if we're getting new heroes like Ana in here, So
I think as far as the gimmicky stuff goes, we'll get the gimmicky stuff coming back. We just need more heroes that fill similar roles. I mean, right now it's sort of if you want one type of hero, there's usually only one hero that precisely fills that. But right now we were talking about Reinhardt. D.Va's a different type of shield tank. But you look years down the road, we might have 2 to 3 heroes that are very similar to Reinhardt. We might have 2 to 3 heroes that are very similar to Tracer. So the idea that one hero limit, we will get comps that sort of resemble the no hero limit shenanigans in time.
Right.
But they'll at least still be able to be balanced out individually to each hero's strengths and whatnot, and it will require more heroes coming out. And again, who knows what the hero release schedule will be. Right now, I feel like Ana took a long time to come out relative to the release of the game, the fact that she was in the pipe before it came out. Right now, I almost feel like we're looking at maybe 4 to 5 heroes a year, if that now.
I mean maybe
they
like,
can kick it out, but yeah.
I don't think they need like a League of Legends or Heroes of the Storm release schedule where there's like a hero every month or every 2 months or something like that, and you get this like 150 hero roster or whatever. I mean, I think it's good that they keep it limited and they have the heroes like fit specific roles that are required, especially in like an FPS game where I think it's a little harder, I guess, to switch heroes sometimes. I mean, I feel like Ana was like really kind of perfectly designed in a lot of ways because I think that she brings a lot of new things to the table, but she also is able to kind of make up for, like, cover some of the roles the other supports had, so that allows her to be viable, right? Like right now, you have to run Lucio because speed boost is the only viable like way to disengage from a fight. Where if the other team's using cooldowns engaging you, or Sound Barrier is the only way to to prevent them from wiping you in some of the situations. Mercy's the only way that you can recover from like a combo of ultimates that wipes your team, basically. Sometimes you can't avoid, there's nothing you can do against Graviton Surge and Rocket Barrage or whatever, right? You're wiped, you have to have Mercy res you. But with Ana, I think she can kind of fill some of those roles. She can help you win fights with a counter engage, with the Sleep Dart and with her Biotic Grenade. She can help survive the combo ults by boosting the healing with the Biotic Grenade. Plus Zenyatta's buffs, he can now help you live through the combo ults, because if he ults in the middle of that Graviton Surge, the Barrage isn't going to kill you. So I think they're finally doing things where they're realizing some of these things are kind of required for team comps to work, and they're introducing more options for those things. So I think we're going to see a lot more variety in this next patch.
The core of my faith in Overwatch and the Overwatch development team, despite the McCree changes and the D.Va changes, are that they try new things and that they've done kind of interesting stuff. Like, everything that comes out is super interesting. I always thought Zen was a crazy interesting character, and like that's just where it starts. Everything else is doing really new and kind of cool stuff, and I think there's almost no better example than Ana coming out. I mean, she just does something really cool. You're like, oh, sniper healing. Wow, there's just cool stuff coming out. They have definitely different ideas about FPSs and gaming in general. So despite some of the small like numbers-based approaches that they're taking to it that I don't necessarily always agree with, like that is where I believe in this game, is that they're trying new stuff and they're not afraid to try to be different in this game. And that's what I think is really cool about the dev team. Yeah, I guess that's just a love letter. We'll just leave that out there.
I mean, I got to give them a lot of credit for. I think the PTR changes and especially the new hero are really well done. It's been a long wait for some of this, especially for like another support hero. Like, we've had the game for 9 months or something basically since the closed beta started, and there hasn't been a new support. But
particularly when you look at the support heroes too, and like some of the support heroes aren't really healing supports in the way that you need a healing support. I mean, Symmetra, she's labeled support, but she's not a go-to in the way that you look at Lucio or Mercy or Zenyatta. But of course, Zenyatta sort of fell off the map for a while. So in a sense, you look at it with the changes, it's not that we're getting one support hero. In a sense, if both are viable, we're almost getting 2 support heroes relative to what we've had now, because Zenyatta goes from irrelevancy back to relevance, and we get a new support hero, period. So you combine the two together, it definitely makes for what could be a much more exciting metagame.
I think most pros are considering Zen more of like a hybrid hero, where he's like DPS, half DPS, half healing, because his damage output is very high, and the healing output is not nearly as high as some of the other heroes, like even Ana. But that kind of also makes like 3 support lineups viable, because a lot of people are talking about having Zen, Ana, and then one of the other 2 supports, depending on what you might need. Like, I've heard some people think Lucio's better in that slot or Mercy's better in that slot, but it'd probably be pretty map dependent. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of options. I mean, obviously 2 supports will probably always be viable. whether you have Ana in there or not. So it's going to be really interesting to see like how teams figure out how to deploy it. And I don't think this is a case where we're just going to have them land on like one thing that's like right. I think that there's going to be a lot of options that work in different scenarios.
Well, the other thing too is, and we've seen we've seen certain maps develop their own metas as well. I feel like new maps coming into the game, depending on how they're designed, as well as just teams figuring stuff out on maps, will really help too. I think there's no more unique map in the game right now.
Didn't Kaplan say that they had like 4 maps in development, but they were like 2 CP or something, and that's Stream with Stir, like more 2 CP? Like, I don't know.
they said they had 4 maps.
Like, you already have that RNG chance to hit it right now. That's just be even more RNG chance to hit it. I do think it's better the time bank, but the maps do have some issues.
Good.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah,
move spawns forward. That's all you need to do. Fix 2 CP.
Well, I don't even think that if you like fixed the spawns on the last point defense and stuff like that, or move tracker spawn close, I don't think that necessarily fixed like all the fundamental problems with those games or with those maps in terms of just like how they play out or like how the gameplay works. They're just not as fun in a lot of ways as playing the payload games.
What do you think, as a TF2 veteran as you are, if you flip those onto kind of tug-of-war-ish control point, like
the
TF2 style? Yeah, you drop a center one somewhere in there, and you go back and forth on it instead.
I mean, a lot of the worry with that was that you'd get the game centered around having more mobility, which is definitely true, but I don't think it would sacrifice too much viability of alternate heroes, especially when you're like defending your last point and things like that. Like, I think there'd be... Right. I think it worked out pretty well, but the other issue of that is that you might end up having issues where you need to balance certain heroes just for that game type versus other game types too, and I don't know. Like that's going to be an issue overall, I think, for the game going forward, especially if they add more game types in, which will be pretty interesting to see like how that comes out. I mean, I don't know. I always have this vision that like in another year we'll be playing Overwatch on like completely different game types than the ones that are in right now, because in a lot of ways I don't think they're ideal, but. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be like...
They should put it on the PTR. You finish Anubis last, then you go... The center point is then Ilias mid, and then you go back to Anubis, and that's your 5 CP. Okay. Do it, please. Do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be definitely interesting to at least let players try that out. Because I know that they've said internally, I think they tried something similar and they didn't like it for whatever reason. Like they didn't like CTF because like Tracer gets the flag or whatever and wins the game or something like that. But CTF is pretty bad in most video games, honestly.
CTF, I feel like is there's certain elements of Quake where certain Quake mods would claim to have good CTF. I feel like for me though, CTF pretty much got ruined by Tribes, where really everything in that game made perfect sense with CTF because you had the entire element of skiing and routes and all the rest, where grabbing the flag was sort of this entirely its own position with a big setup, and the flow for that in Tribes worked out really well for CTF to the point where I look at CTF in other games, it's like, maybe not so much in this game. I did want to make one note before we get too far away from it, is that I think that comps are going to get more specific to certain maps as time goes on. Nambani right now probably has the most variety of any, especially early. Point A and Nambani, for both the attack and defense, has a lot of variety on it that you don't really see in a whole lot of other maps right now, where even pre-buff Diva was getting used a whole lot. The sort of go in, fight for the top. You saw a lot of Torbjorn. You saw a lot of even May from time to time, although that sort of fell off. You saw different looks at things. Yeah, and offensive Bastion would come in. So, or defensive Bastion. We saw it on both ends. So I think as teams get a little bit more studied up on maps as they try new things, as perhaps you get more coaches and analysts and stuff in the scene, I think we'll see teams figure out more sort of very specific areas where you can make specific compositions work, rather than right now you see a lot of maps where teams just sort of run, okay, we're going to run this generalist comp that's going to be, this is the top meta, we're going to run for it. Where in reality, I think there's a lot of points in the game where you could probably make a case that switching to a different comp for point X, Y, or Z makes more sense in the long run.
I think there's a couple points there where, like, for a lot of teams, practicing that generalist comp probably provides the best utility in terms of their time spent, because they still have a lot of room to improve with it. Whereas maybe for a team like Envious and you're already good enough with it, you can try more new things and figure out what's actually better than doing the generalist thing. So I think as more teams get more comfortable overall, we'll see that variety come out. I had something else, but I forgot what it was. So
yeah, I'll save you. I'll just say that any variety and interesting stuff coming out is definitely going to be from North America. EU on defense, especially, is just super standard and boring right now. Step up your Symmetra game, boys.
Oh, I was going to say that with time bank mode coming into payload as well in the future, I think that opens up more opportunity to have more gimmick compositions, basically. Because you're not as penalized if your gimmick fails, and there's more chances to do it if you're playing multiple rounds, right? So I think that kind of gives some opportunity for that kind of thing.
Maybe. I don't know. What we've seen in the very short history of competitive assault maps has been one team tries something kind of weird, and then the other team does something that works, and then the opposing team copies it. We saw it with like Junkrat on Volskaya. I think Reunited started running
like the teams know anything.
Right. No, the meta. Yeah,
they haven't practiced 2CP maps enough, even though it's still like a thing now. You know. Like
that is defined before your eyes.
I don't even know if they will know by the time the ESL tournament happens. Like they're still just going to be like throwing shit at the wall, you know?
Right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting.
The interesting of the 2CP maps, of course, is that teams are getting forced to play more either by big map pools and say a best of 7 or something, or mandated by ESL rules or all the rest. Yeah, I mean, teams clearly don't scrim very much. I don't think they scrim really at all on any of the 2CP maps that are in there right now in Volskaya, Hanamura, and Temple. It's not something that people want to dedicate time to. So when teams do get thrown on in the middle of a tournament, sort of even the barest amount of prep would really help teams a whole lot. And that's one of those things where if you are sort of managing a team, coaching a team, whatever it is, it'd probably be worth the mention. It's like, hey, maybe you do, of all the maps you do in a day, maybe try and do at least one round of a 2CP map if you can get the other team to agree. Just one per day at the very least.
I don't think that really gives you much benefit, though, because you try one per day or something like that, and you try a strat, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. That's not enough information to know if that strat's good. Like, If it works, maybe it works, and then you pull it out in a tournament and someone else does something you didn't see and you just get destroyed or something, you know? Like, I think these, you need to put a lot of specific effort into a map to really make it work. Like, I feel like if you're playing anything, you should practice the same thing twice in a row against the same team if you really want to get a lot of benefit out of that. I know some people don't like that because it's boring maybe, but, I think that's how teams should be practicing at least.
The interesting thing is that Overwatch opened with a whole lot of maps. Sometimes you wonder if you just talking about the prep issue here, where you wonder if teams are going to be slow to develop on some of the maps just because of the fact that there are so many different maps to cover compared to, say, if you had a competitive map pool of 6 maps and you could just grind all of them out as only those. But right now, I mean, we talk about 4 new maps being in the pipe that are going to be coming out potentially soon and all the rest. It's sort of there's almost map oversaturation to extent for the players and prepping on them and trying to bring out their best.
True, especially with like the 2CP maps, because I think that there probably are a wider range of viable like strategies and lineups you can use to attack those points. So I think that there's more permutations to actually practice as well, and I don't think teams are going to be able to ever hit all of those. But that also brings up the point of like preparation coaching, where it could really have a huge impact with those maps. I think if teams figure out a good way to prepare and learn outside of just scrimming it.
Yeah, I mean, but also to the point, like maps coming in this late, also into Overwatch. I think it's okay and it's easier for the players to adjust now because, I mean, how many more times do you need to practice your Kings Road defense or Hollywood defense? Like, I think they have things pretty much set on certain maps so that the practice time can be devoted to the new maps. Now it's going to be interesting.
When the new patch comes out, it's all different, right? Like the strategy's probably worthless. Yeah. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, I think it just goes to show, it's a complicated game, and there's a lot of variables that you need to really focus on, I guess, to become a top team. Yeah.
Alrighty, so I think we've talked a lot about the PTR stuff, patches, upcoming stuff. Sort of leads us to the end of things here. We're talking about sort of final thoughts, upcoming events, and all the rest. I know upcoming events, of course, me and Hex and I are going to be casting Beat Invitational right after this. Will be the final day of that. It'll be 3 sets going on. We'll be leading off, let's see, let me get this right. We'll be leading off with C9 versus NG Red, which, of course, could be really big. NG Red, of course, is being C9 in recent memory. C9 looking to bring things back in their favor. The winner of that will be facing off against Code 7, and the winner of that brings their way to the grand finals, where they'll be taking off against Envy in a best-of-7, which right now, the way Envy is playing, it could just be a quick 4 games. But either way, I feel like the 2 best of 5s starting out should be really, really cool. And the best out of 7, it's sort of, all right, do you have what it takes to get the better of Envy? It's all tonight.
Are you guys going to survive?
I'll survive.
This is a light day. Yeah,
yeah, I know. This is
we'll see. Yeah.
Sam's just like, I want no part of that right now.
No way.
It's a long day. But short of that, let's see. Go back to our schedule here to make sure we're not forgetting anything. But
another thing I'm looking forward to this week is the end of the Nexus Cup, which is the big event going on in Korea featuring some Chinese teams. I think there's 3 teams left. I think Chinese team Invictus Gaming plays UW Artisan in the lower finals, and the winner plays MIG Frost, which is basically like the best team in Korea. And if you haven't really seen them play, like, those teams are pretty legit. I mean, they have some very, very talented players. And they play pretty aggro. It's pretty fun to watch.
My general take on the Asian team right now is that they've been improving at a very, very just rapid rate. And it shows also in the sense that if you want to believe the rumors that have been going around, is that they are getting paid very well also. The organizations that are in early over there, they are sparing no expense. They are paying their players well. They are getting very good team facilities, coaches, etc. They're pulling out all the stops because a lot of these orgs think that Overwatch will be the next big thing for esports in Korea. So they want to be there at day one. They want to make sure they have the proper thing. When I say getting paid, I mean, we're talking about there's been rumors here, both Korea and EU, that players now are getting to the point where 5-6K per player per month. This is becoming a thing. The salaries are going up very rapidly. I think NA right now actually is probably behind EU and Korea from all things to be said. But I guess the main takeaway is that the main takeaway is that orgs are really ramping up their involvement, and they are ramping up their investment. Teams see a big future in Overwatch, so it'll be interesting. And I gotta say, for the Korean scene, if they're putting in that level of effort and investment, and they're playing they're training at hours at a more intense rate than NA and EU, which right now it sounds like they are, look out when we get to our first worldwide event, because they could very well steal it. I know it's if Slasher were here, Slasher would be like, EU has a huge edge.
We already did talk about this last week a little bit, right? Like, yeah. It is a huge edge, but you still have to wonder, with the way some of these Korean teams look, and supposedly putting in 14-hour days with like 6 hours of scrims or 8 hours of scrims, 10 hours and whatnot. I think MIG has like 2 teams in house that they practice against each other with, so they get like
specialized mechanical. I was gonna say it's also specialized mechanical practice as well, where they're doing drills, they're doing the things that they need to do. They're really trying to min-max everything and trying to build catch up to that gap in mechanical skill. And right now, you think about coordination. From what I've seen of the Korean teams, it does feel like their initiations, how they go in stuff, they are more coordinated than NA and EU teams. Really, NA and EU are sort of holding their own based on the fact that they have years and years of mechanical practice. But how long can that really last?
I think anyone who underestimates the Korean scene does so at their own peril. You saw it in Heroes of the Storm. MVP Black came on the scene and just started rocking people out of nowhere. MVP has a team now that's going to be in the Ghost of Gamers NA this weekend. Hopefully they register and show up. It's MVP Space. And I think that you don't understand necessarily the culture, the time, the everything, the kind of the ethos that they have for esports in Korea. If you don't think that these guys are going to at least show up on a LAN and probably win it, I think you're just wrong, and you don't understand exactly how seriously esports is treated there. And I'm really stoked to see these guys start entering the scene. I think if they can even start taking matches across ping zones, things like that, then at LAN they're going to be beasts. I would be very afraid of the Korean teams, organizations, players, etc. if I were in NA or EU. But of course, NA has the best team in the world, an envious, totally North American team.
With one American player, yes.
That's all it takes.
Is Idaho even part of America?
It is the most America. It's like you have to own a gun if you live in Idaho, I think.
You also have potatoes there that supply McDonald's. Don't forget that.
Exactly.
Of course, we're just poking a little bit fun at Tailspin. Tailspin, of course, Idaho native, did not have the best internet up there. Now, of course, with the rest of Envy in the team house in North Carolina.
He's making America great again.
Oh my goodness. At least in esports. So I think that's covered most of our points here. I guess, of course, Noble stuff coming up, aside from the beat stuff tonight, ESL qualifiers, round number 3 coming at your way next week. And it'll be interesting in terms of seeing what's going on there, just because, of course, for ESL, I feel like weeks 3 and 4 are where you're going to have a lot of room for new teams, and that'll be something to watch to see what teams actually do pop out of those qualifiers.
Yeah, I think there's been a couple teams biding their time. Maybe it's not even registered that will probably be in there for these last 2 qualifiers. I know there's a couple teams out there that I think are pretty decent that probably should get in and probably will, but I'm just looking forward to seeing some new team made up of people that are 80 plus on the ladder or something, because there are some people out there that are teamless up there, trying their hand. It'll be interesting because if they have the skill but not the experience, they should be able to get in some of these rounds, I think, now. But maybe they'll get the experience, by the time the big tourney comes around.
Yeah, there's only about 8 good teams in each region, so they're already all through. Well, the next couple of qualifiers are going to be interesting, to say the least.
All right, well, I think we've covered everything we had planned here. You guys have any final words, thoughts, anything you want to say before we head off here for the day?
All right, I'll kick it off. One thing, to Blizzard directly, McCree is fine. He was very good. It's okay having a hero that's hard to play. Just take that to heart. Yeah, and we're going to be on Beta Invitational about a half hour on Twitter. I'm Hexagrams, on Twitch TV. I'm Hexagrams. Thanks for having me on today, guys. It was really fun.
Thanks for joining us when Mr. Slasher couldn't make it. I had fun too. That's about it. I don't got anything else to add.
Well, for me, I also had fun, and of course, as Hex mentioned, we'll be casting here in about a half hour, a little bit more than that, but it will be on the Beat Invitational channel. Of course, you can follow me Twitter at TempoZP, and I'm gonna save my salads for later. You can't do too much in one day, but thank you guys, of course, for unless you're Hex, in which case you can salad all day long.
Oh, I got plenty.
But no, aside from that, thank you guys, of course, for tuning in and watching us. We'll be back next week with more to talk about. Certainly more tournaments are finishing up. Lots of good events on the way, but it's a bright future for our watch. And once again, thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.